Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Gillian Balaban and I am the Standard Assistant at GRI. Welcome to this meeting of the Global Sustainability Standards Board, known by its acronym the GSSB, held on 27 June 2019. This virtual meeting is being hosted from Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Please note that all public GSSB meetings are being recorded and you can find the audio recording on the GSSB webpage along with high-level summaries of previous GSSB meetings. Present from the GRI Secretariat today are Bastian Buck, Chief of Standards, Margarita Lysenkova, Manager Sector Programme, Mia de Hadmeyer, Manager Standards, Pamela Carpio, Senior Coordinator Governance Relations, and Sarah Jane Dominic, Senior Manager Standards. We will now do a roll call. Corley LaRue.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you, Corley. Evan Harvey.
Hello, everyone. Present.
Thank you. Gustavo Sinner.
Hi, hello, everyone.
Good afternoon. Jennifer Prinsing. We understand Jennifer may be having a few problems. Julia Wilson.
Present. Present, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Kent Swift.
I'm present.
Good, thank you. Kirsten Margrethe Hovey.
Present.
Thank you. Michelle Vasser.
Present.
Peter Colley.
Good evening, I'm present.
Good evening. Ramakrishnan.
This is Pamela Carpio. On behalf of Rama, he is present.
Okay, thank you very much. Robin Leeson. Robin may join the call a little later. Tungli Mo.
Present.
Vincent Kong. Vincent, can you hear us? We'll come back to Vincent and then GSSB Chair Judy Kuczewski.
I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. GSSB member Loredana Carter sent her apologies. I will now hand back to the Chair, Judy Kuczewski, to open the meeting.
Thank you very much, Jill. And thank you to everyone who has made the time to join us today, including the GSSB members and anyone who may be listening to the webcast at the moment. I know that we are having some technical difficulties with the connections today. So we have to make some accommodations. I believe, for the record, Gillian, Vincent Kong actually is on the line, and for some reason we can't hear him, but he can hear us, as explained in the chat window.
Yes,
we may have to make some accommodations as far as we definitely have to make some adjustments to our agenda because of the connection problems. It is important for us to have a quorum, and this will be necessary when we need to take decisions. So we're going to, you can see the agenda for today's call in the slide that's being presented at the moment. We're going to move this around so that we can take the decision discussion points at a time when we have one or two further members connected. And we'll take another roll call at that point and make sure that any votes are properly accounted for. Bastian, shall we... Are we to begin now with an update on the tax and payments to governments discussion? Is that correct? So this would be session 3 on the agenda.
That is indeed correct, yes.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to the standards division then to talk us through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. This is Mia speaking, and good afternoon to everyone attending. I'm going to give you a brief status update and overview in relation to the Tax and Payments to Governments project, given that a few months ago the public comment period finished. So I will be giving you very much an overview of the key themes today that we received during that public comment period, and a bit of a status update on some of the progress that the Technical Committee has made in responding to these key themes. We haven't completed that work yet, but given this is a key opportunity before we meet in person in September, we thought it was a good idea. I'll start off with a technical point, and Bastian, you can correct me if I say this in the wrong way, but just to confirm that back in May, the GSSB was presented with a proposal to replace one of the Technical Committee members from the investor constituency. This was due to a role change for the existing member, and they will be replaced by Kate Elliott, also from the investor constituency, and the GSSB unanimously approved that change of membership, or the Kate joining the technical committee. I would note here that despite approving that change, one GSSB member did raise concerns about potential imbalance of regional representation on the technical committee, and they suggested for future reference broader global coverage, particularly from emerging and developing economies, should be sought to the extent where experts were available. Sorry, let me just change slides. Okay, so with that, there's nothing else I need to do in relation to that decision. Okay, so I'll just move into the overview now. So as you will remember, we received just over 80 submissions on the exposure draft of the Tax and Payments to Government Standard, and when broken down into individual comments, this equated to around about 1,200 comments, which have now been coded and aggregated into themes. The majority of these comments have now been presented to the Technical Committee over the course of 2 meetings, including an additional in-person meeting that we held back in May. And most of the substantive issues arising from those comments have been concluded or are currently being worked through by the group. We do have 2 additional meetings coming up at the beginning of July and August. And we plan to cover some smaller comment themes that we haven't had a chance to review there, and to finalise any changes to the standard before we submit to the GSSB for approval in September. So if I just start with some of the general feedback, the majority of respondents who submitted public comments expressed support for the intention of this standard to increase tax transparency. Most were also largely supportive of the structure and content of the exposure draft, confirming that the information will be useful in understanding the tax practices and contributions of organisations. A handful of respondents expressed concern or opposition to the standard. Some were concerned about the utility of the information that would be produced reporting under this standard, suggesting that the information would not be useful for report users, or that it may lead to confusion or misinterpretation. Some of these respondents who expressed concern felt that the interaction and impact of public reporting on tax in and of itself would be in conflict with existing reporting to regulators, and that these issues have not been sufficiently explored. Just checking one technical thing here, just one moment. Just bear with us for 1 second, we're just checking the live stream here. Okay, sorry about that. I'll keep going. So beyond the few respondents who expressed concerns about the inclusion of country-by-country information, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, there were no specific themes of feedback submitted which would catalyse a structural change to the standard. In fact, there was praise of the balance between the management approach disclosures and the topic-specific disclosures. The vast majority of comments on changes were focused on specific wordings of definitions, reporting requirements and guidance. I would also note that there were a high number of comments focused on the alignment of the standard with other initiatives and where there could be additional alignment between these. Some of the comments encouraged more alignment with OECD BEPS in particular, and we've obviously talked about OECD before, as well as other initiatives in order to increase the ease of reporting for organisations, while others wanted to actually see additional detail from OECD BEPS, such as transfer pricing documentation included in the standard. Other commenters felt that while increased harmonisation of the reporting landscape was of course optimal or is optimal, they did not necessarily feel that having the standard harmonised with existing requirements was the best way forward, with a few commenters suggesting the standard offered a better option. So if I just move on to some of the more specifics, I'll break the presentation in the next couple of slides into management approach and topic-specific disclosures. And I'll talk about the management approach first. So the comments on the management approach disclosures were largely positive. Approximately half of the respondents mentioned that all management approach reporting requirements are critical to illustrate the approach to tax and payments to governments by reporting organisations. And the majority of respondents also confirmed that these disclosures are understandable, feasible, and would be useful to a wide range of stakeholders, in particular investors who are looking to understand whether a tax strategy exists and whether an appropriate tax governance framework is in place in order to help them understand tax risks. Comments on the specific content of disclosures 1, 2 and 3, the management approach disclosures, also focus mainly on small wording changes and in fact primarily focused on enhancing requirements or guidance in order to elicit more detail about the existing reporting requirements. Some of the specific comment themes that have come through, the more significant ones, were in relation to whether the level and detail of disclosure on the tax strategy is sufficient. So here I'm referring to disclosure 1, and the vast majority of comments were looking for, we're questioning whether or not organisations should be asked to disclose their tax strategy, whether or not it's public. So we currently ask for a link to the strategy if it's publicly available. And the other set of comments on this particular disclosure were related to clarity between issues of global and local tax strategies. The second substantial comment theme in relation to the management approach was in relation to 1A, 3 and 4. So this is about the approach to regulatory compliance and also how the tax strategy is linked to the business and sustainable development strategies of the organisation. In particular, respondents were looking for some more clarity about the expectations of reporting against these particular reporting requirements. And also there was some wording in 1A4, and this talked about how the tax strategy is linked to the broader economic needs of the countries in which the organisation operates. And respondents felt that this was overly onerous and probably asking organisations too much. The final significant comment theme on management approach is in relation to disclosure 3. And this is where we had asked for reporting on processes for collecting and considering the views and concerns of external stakeholders. And there was some concerns raised about the limiting of this to external stakeholders only. Oh, sorry. Okay, so just as a quick insight into directionally where the technical committee has made some decisions about what they will recommend to the GSSB in terms of changes in response to these comments. they have decided that they won't change the requirement. They won't recommend a change in the requirement in relation to tax strategy, so they'll continue to point at disclosures of tax strategy where it's already publicly available. But some additional guidance will be provided around the interaction between local and global tax strategies and how organisations should report where they have sort of varying scopes covered by different tax strategies. Also, some additional guidance has been added in relation to what is meant by spirit of the law, and the intention is to clarify here that this is very much about intended outcomes, so the behaviour of the organisation. In addition, we've added some commentary which has been drawn directly from the OECD M&E guidelines here, from their taxation chapter on spirit of the law. And we have made a change to reporting requirement 1A4, which is to delete those words which were causing some reporting organisations some concern. So it now reads how the tax strategy is linked to the business and sustainable development strategies of the organisation and no longer refers to the broader economic needs of the countries in which they operate. That's for disclosure 1. For disclosure 2, we've augmented some guidance, in particular in relation to how the tax approach may be embedded in the organisation. This is really just adding a variety of examples in that guidance. And for number 3, we've responded to the comments on the focus on external stakeholders and have reworded disclosure 3A3 in order to be inclusive of both external and internal stakeholders. Okay, sorry, and I probably need to go a little bit faster, so... okay, so if we move now to the topic-specific disclosures, so if you cast your mind back, you remember these were disclosures 4 and 5. Once again, feedback was largely positive on the topic-specific disclosures. However, there did continue to be some more trepidation about the reporting requirements in relation to this portion of the standard than disclosures 1 to 3. I think that was probably to be expected. Many respondents confirmed that the reporting requirements in these disclosures will significantly increase transparency and will be useful to a number of stakeholders, including, and these are some of the stakeholders listed specifically, investors, unions, academics, those who have an interest in human rights, civil liberties, or those who lobby for public services. Respondents also confirmed that the reporting requirements are critical to understanding an organisation's tax practices in a relevant jurisdiction. And several respondents confirmed that public country-by-country reporting generally is essential to have a complete understanding of a reporting entity's tax practices. Some respondents did feel that the risks of reporting the proposed topic-specific disclosures outweigh the benefits, and a number of respondents continue to encourage further consideration should be given to balancing the reporting burden and compliance costs of the disclosures with the value of the information reported, and reiterated that caution should be exercised in ensuring that the standard is rolled out in a way that is sensitive to reporters' challenges and concerns. The specific concerns here focused again primarily on refinements, though there were some slightly more substantial comments than in relation to the reporting requirements associated with the management approach. So some of the key comments on disclosures 4 and 5 were about refinement of definitions and terms, and this included in particular the terms entity and tax jurisdiction. There was some discussion on reporting on the number of workers versus the number of employees. There was also some clarifications to be made about what reconciling with the audited financial statements means. And there was some concerns raised in relation to the specific reporting requirements 5F and 5G. And so the first is about the reasons for the difference between the corporate income tax accrued on profit and loss and the tax due if the statutory tax rate is applied to profit and loss before tax. And 5G was around reporting significant tax incentives. There was also some further technical clarifications related to some wording in the standard, including in relation to withholding tax. Okay, so if I just once again run through some of the proposed changes. So we are looking at the definition of tax jurisdiction, and that will be revised to further clarify the scope of the reporting is at a country level, so that there can be no mistake that we're talking about any more granular level than the country level, and to ensure that countries and or territories that choose not to exercise their fiscal autonomy to charge taxes are not excluded from reporting, which was a potential loophole identified by some stakeholders and respondents. We've also deleted the definition of the word entity from the glossary. It was identified that having a definition of the word entity that was unique to tax was affecting the use of the word in other standards. So additional guidance on what entity means in this particular context has been included in the guidance rather than as a definition. And sorry, I can see there's a number missing there, but 4B1 and 4B2, which were in relation to reporting on the number of entities and the names of the principal entities, have been combined. So now there would just be a reporting of the names of the entities. And this is more aligned with what is required under GRI 10245, where a list of entities is already required. And in terms of disclosure 5, we've deleted, sorry, something's happened in the numbering here. That should say 5G, which is related to significant tax incentives. My apologies. So the very first dot point, oh, it says 5G, not on my slides. So 5G, significant tax incentives. This requirement has now been deleted. It was felt that reporting could be insightful without the inclusion of this reporting requirement, and that in fact a volume of the information on significant tax incentives would indeed, the valuable components of this would be reported under 5F. So a significant tax incentive could be a reason for a difference between corporate income tax accrued and the tax due if the statutory rate was applied. So where that was significant, that would be already reported under F. Further guidance for clause 1.4.1 was inserted, and this is to clarify the requirement to reconcile with the financial statement. So this is just making the expectation clearer. And a few small technical corrections were made to clause 1.4.2 and also the guidance for 5B. Sorry. Okay. So that, just before we close out, we've just got another couple of issues, 2 more slides. So there were 2 issues of feasibility that I wanted to touch on as well. And the first is in relation to alignment. As I've already flagged, we collected a large volume of data on the alignment of standards with other instruments. We did ask this question specifically around existing reporting requirements, but there was also a large volume of comments from, for example, the investor constituency around alignment with OECD BEPS. Many respondents supported the existing level of alignment between the standard and OECD BEPS, or the apparent alignment between these two, while others did note some inconsistencies. And the comments were primarily focused on the challenges of reporting different sets of information for reporting organisations, or on the other side, the desire to have more information currently reported under OECD BEPS reported publicly. And obviously I mentioned that in the first couple of slides. So the technical committee did spend some time discussing issues of alignment and harmonisation. However, the members reiterated and were comfortable that while they recognise the challenges differences between reporting requirements can present, they felt that in this case, where a difference exists between what is being asked for in the standard and what is being asked for in other instruments, for example, OECD BEPS, it is only where it is necessary to ensure appropriately meaningful information for report users. And so they acknowledge those challenges but continue to feel comfortable that the differences are appropriate and relevant for the standard. The second one is an issue of timing, and this continues to be discussed. This was not a significant theme in the comments actually, but a small number of respondents raised some concern on the timing of publishing tax data at the point in time when they published their sustainability reports. And on review, it became apparent that this would be somewhat of a different practice for reporting organisations. So currently reporting organisations have quite an extended period after they have published their financial statements in which to report detailed tax information both to the regulator but also and also under OECD BEPS would also be to the regulator. And so there was some concern that the information may not be available at the point in time that they wanted to publish their sustainability reports. So the technical committee has had a discussion on this, a lengthy discussion, and they acknowledge that it would involve a change in practice to report in particular the public country by country information at the point in time when sustainability reports were published. And they acknowledged that this may be difficult for some organisations initially. However, they felt that the vast majority of information can be available at that point in time, and the most significant challenge would be related to 5F, which again is about the reasons for the difference between corporate income tax accrued on profit and loss and the tax due if the statutory tax rate is applied to profit and loss before tax. But given that this requires a narrative explanation and not a corporate tax reconciliation, they felt that it would be possible and should not be an obstacle to reporting the information. This will be something that we discuss again with the technical committee in our next meeting to ensure that we've really identified any issues that this may throw up, and we can give an update again to the GSSB. Is there anything that you wanted to add around that discussion on timing, maybe Bastian or Ken?
First of all, Mia, this is Judy. There's been a question raised by a member. Could you clarify what is 5F?
Yeah, sorry. So 5F is the reasons for the difference between corporate income tax accrued on profit and loss and the tax due if the statutory tax rate is applied to profit and loss before tax. So in very shorthand, if this was a qualitative expectation, it would be called the corporate tax reconciliation. But this is slightly different in that we're only asking for a narrative explanation. So an organisation would essentially describe the reasons rather than presenting an entire qualitative reconciliation.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
No problem. So I've got one more slide. So we do have two other suggestions that have that we would like to discuss. The first is in relation to the name of the standard. And actually most of these comments came up in stakeholder engagement events rather than through the public comment, the formal public comment process. And one of them is in relation to the name of the standard. So the proposed content of the standard does not really cover the full scope of payments to government. And if you look even if at the standard, our own standard GRI 201, payments to government also covers things like penalties. And so what we're proposing is that perhaps we should change the name of the standard to better reflect the content, and that for now payments to government would be continued to be covered by GRI 201, and obviously that's something that we could look at whether we need to make a recommendation about that content being somewhere else. But it doesn't currently reflect the topic to have the name tax and payments to governments. So we're proposing we change that. The second, and perhaps this will generate a little bit more discussion, is in relation to the topic-specific disclosures. And you remember previously we had a discussion about the division of the topic-specific disclosures between 4 and 5, and the fact that this was very much to do with understandability and the ability for organisations to understand the contextual information versus the very technical tax and financial information. But this required us to essentially insert an exception to the in accordance criteria for core. This did not come up through the public comments, the formal submissions, but it did come up many times when speaking to stakeholders in some of the stakeholder engagement events, particularly on the webinars that we had. And we want to propose that we look at combining these two now in order to remove that exception. It seems to be that the risk of people recognising the need to report both might outweigh the benefits of making the disclosures more understandable when you look at them, or easier to digest. And of course we note that the recent exposure draft of waste had a similar structure with a single disclosure. So that is a proposal coming from the Standards Division. Those two things have not been discussed with the technical committee yet, but will be taken to them at the next meeting. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mia. First of all, I'd just like to say that as members will be aware, this proposed standard has received a lot of engagement from commenters during the public comment process, which is fantastic. But it has meant that there's a lot of work for the technical committee and for Mia and her colleagues at the Standards Division. So thank you very much for working through this so methodically and presenting the interim report on this. And I understand the task is not complete yet on this, so we still have more to be discussed and debated and presented back before this comes back to the GSSB in final form. Is there any other comment or information from the Standards Division on this before I open it up for any discussion or questions from the GSSB members?
No comments from us.
Okay, I believe I've got a few people who might want to make a comment. Please feel free to use the chat window if you wish, otherwise I think we'll just listen out for people to raise their hands. Now, first of all, Gustavo, did you want to make a comment? There is a comment in the chat window. I wondered if you wanted to add that into the record before we go on to some of the others.
Thanks, Judy. I'm seeing that about the comment of the timing of the previous slide. I think that could be useful to add that comment about the narrative disclosure, to add it in the recommendation in the structure of the disclosure. No, I think it could be better in recommendation part than in the guidance part. So that's was wanted to add.
Thank you very much, Gustavo. One little note, I think probably for the Standards Division, is that I'm under the impression that at least one of our members has lost video contact with the presentation, and so following, on a separate copy of the presentation, if you could please just announce which slide you're on as you move through the presentation at this point, that would be very helpful.
Noted,
Kirsten,
yeah.
Thank you. Kirsten, please go ahead.
Thank you. This was a very thorough walkthrough, but still it was pretty overwhelming to follow. It would have been good to have seen it before the review, because it's a bit challenging to follow with so much information at the same time. Just a question. It is said several times that the majority of the respondents said that the disclosures are understandable and feasible, or useful and feasible. Feasible was used several times here. I'm just wondering, is that the respondents in general, or is it the respondents that are reporting organizations that answered so? And if it was all of the respondents, do we see any differences if we look into the reporting organizations?
Thank you for that question. It's all of the respondents. We haven't done any particular analysis in relation to certain constituencies. So I haven't extracted, say, for example, business in order to assess their particular comments. All of the information presented is in relation to all respondents.
It's a bit challenging for me to understand how those who are not reporting organizations can answer to if this is feasible to respond on or not. So it would have been very useful to have a separation between the two kinds of respondents here. Thank you.
Perhaps we can ask for a bit more detail on this for our next discussion of this topic, which I imagine would be at the in-person meeting coming up. In order to, it is a judgment call, isn't it? When you ask all stakeholders to comment on things that in a practical sense may be perceived differently by different types of stakeholders. It could be helpful to get a little bit more detail on that. Are there other, Peter Colley, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, thank you. With respect to the very last bit of the presentation, is there any view from the Standards Division about what their preferred name for the standard will be if the word payments is going to be deleted? And refresh my memory about the definitions re-scope. If it's going to be principally tax, refresh my memory about the scope of tax, because I'm just obviously a little concerned that if it's defined too narrowly, then significant disclosures might not be made, or there might be significant omissions about what payments to government are occurring.
Thank you for that question. So the proposal would be just simply to call it tax at this stage, though we could look at that in a little bit more detail. So essentially the reporting requirements are focused on corporate income tax. There are then a number of reporting recommendations which cast the net more widely. So they also ask for reporting around those withheld and paid on behalf of employees, those taxes collected from customers on behalf of a tax authority, and then industry related and other taxes. And at the moment, all payments to government is included in that line. But when you look at the guidance on those taxes, on that particular reporting recommendation, it does then again refer to things like industry taxes such as energy tax or airline tax, property taxes, and I suppose the comments from stakeholders were that essentially the place for reporting on payments to government is in this one reporting recommendation, and so therefore the name of the standard doesn't reflect that appropriately.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else with questions or comments? Okay, I'm not hearing any, so I think I would just conclude this by again saying thank you very much to Mia for all of the information. We look forward to the rest of it and to the sort of final recommendations of the technical committee, which again we are very grateful for the time and effort that they've all spent on this so far. Shall we move backwards in our agenda while I believe we can now say that we are confident that we have a quorum of members present, and so we can get back on track with our planned agenda. Is it necessary for us now to take another roll call, Jill, to just confirm that this is the case?
Yes, I can do roll call now.
Thank you.
Okay, Corley Daru.
Still present.
Thank you. Evan Harvey.
I'm here.
Good. Gustavo Sinner.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. Julia Wilson.
Here, present.
Kent Swift.
I am here.
Kirsten Margita Hovey.
Still here.
Thank you. Michelle Wasser.
Present.
Peter Colley.
Present.
Robin Leeson.
Present.
Tunley Moe. I'll repeat it.
Present.
Thank you,
Present.
Tunley. Vincent Kong.
Present.
Thank you.
Present.
And GSSB Chair Judy Kuskowski.
I'm here.
Thank you. And we understand Jennifer Prinsing and Ramakrishnan are listening by telephone.
Very good. Okay, well, with that confirmed, then, shall we go back to the item, tell me again, I suppose this is item 1, which would be the approval of the meeting record from our meeting in March. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
If somebody can reverse the slides accordingly, that would be good. You should all have received, item 1, you should all have received the draft summary from the meeting held on the 25th and 26th of March. And we have at this point to ask, first of all, I'm not aware of any comments or edits that have been submitted, but please advise now if there's any discussion of this content. Okay, hearing none. The question is, does the GSSB approve item 1, the draft summary of the meeting? I'll ask again if there is any objection or discussion of this.
Kirsten here. I don't have any objections. I'm just wondering if we will get any status on the action items of the standards division. It's related to several of the action points listed on page 4 and 5.
Okay. Shall I put that back to the standards division? There's a number of action items on pages 4 and 5. I believe I believe some of these are in process, and at least some of them will be discussed today on today's meeting. But Bastian, can I put that back to you to sort of explain, to the extent that we don't talk about all of these today, do you intend to bring that forward for update or discussion at some point in the future?
Yes, so most of them will be covered in the course of the meeting today. For those that will not be covered, we have a private session, where I will provide an update, and we will circle back to this in the in-person meeting in September, and then also confirm all items. But there is action on almost all of them at the moment.
Thank you very much for that, Bastian. Okay, hearing no objections or further interventions on this, I think we can agree that this has been approved. Thank you very much. So next, if I'm not mistaken, is the discussion of the working group membership for the oil, gas, and coal sector standard. Is that correct?
That is indeed correct.
Okay. And I'm going to pass it over to Sarah Jane.
No.
No,
this is
you.
Margarita and me.
Okay.
Margarita will present the outcome of our search process for the project working group, and I will present the approval in a moment.
Okay, so we're on. I'm not sure if we have the problem of the lost slide presentation anymore, but for the record, this is now slide 6.
Yes, this is slide 6, and we're now going to the slide 7. Hello, this is Margarita speaking. Good afternoon to everybody on the line. And this is an exciting moment for the oil, gas, and coal project, as we are presenting the project working group membership proposal. I'll mention that we have previously shared the proposal with the subcommittee and the anonymized list of all applicants who applied, and the subcommittee was supportive of the proposal. Some statistics around the recruitment process. So the open call closed on the 4th of May, and we received a total of 82 applications from well-qualified candidates. And based on my knowledge, this is the highest number of candidates in GRI's nearly 20 years of running expert working groups. Together with the team, we reviewed all the applications received. We conducted more than 30 structured interviews and the final evaluation of the candidates with the view to balance constituencies and regions. You can see from the proposal that we also have an intention to involve shortlisted candidates who have not been nominated to join the project working group for an expert review session with the aim of providing input to the draft standard before it goes out for public comment. This is the question 2 in the proposal. And we also intend to do a targeted outreach for certain groups during the public comment period, and namely those are Latin America, Africa, and Asia regions. This is question number 3. If you have any questions around the composition, feel free to ask.
This is Bastian. I think to add to Margarita's comments on this, I think what we see also is a continuation of the trend that we have more and more senior level applications to our working groups, and most of the candidates that we're proposing have 15 years plus experience.
Indeed.
And that is a continuation of a positive trend. Also, we were able here to have what we feel is adequate representation of the different groups, and also acknowledging, I think, a conversation that was happening as part of the GSB discussions in the run-up to this project, that business needs to have a clear representation in this group, and we were able to do that across the board for the different sub-industries also. So we're quite happy with that outcome of the process, and we believe it is a strong group that we're putting forward. We take any questions, then we want to move to the approval.
Any questions from participants? You have received the written documentation on this item 2. So we're on slide 8.
Yes,
now.
we're on slide 8.
And
if there are no further questions, we would like to take the vote of the GSB, and we go member by member.
Member by member, yep.
Jill, can I ask you to go through the list once again? We just want to make sure that we have this on record appropriately, and that will be practice going forward, that for any vote on a substantive matter like this, that the DPOC will also be interested in, that we have the recording of the vote.
Thank you, Bastian. If you can just agree or disagree when I read out your name, that will be fine. Thank you. We'll start with Corley Deroux.
Agreed.
Thank you. Evan Harvey.
Agreed.
Thank you. Gustavo Sinner. Gustavo. I'll come back to Gustavo. Julia Wilson.
Agree.
Thank you. Kent Swift.
Agree.
Thank you. Kirsten Margriete Harvey.
Agree.
Thank you. Michel Vasser.
Agree.
Thank you. Peter Colley.
Agreed.
Thank you. Robin Leeson.
Agreed.
Thank you. Tun Limo.
Agree.
Thank you. Vincent Kong.
Agree.
GSSB Chair Judy Krukowski.
Agreed.
Thank you. And I'll go back to Gustavo Sinner. And we understand Jennifer and Rama will send their approval by email. Thank you.
With Gustavo not having been audible, Do we have the required votes?
Yes, we have. Yeah.
Yes, I understand Gustavo is on the line, but there is obviously some kind of a problem with his audio. But if we are confirmed that that was sufficient, then thank you very much. We will ensure that the written record is robust as to this vote. And thank you very much to the Standards Division for the time that was spent constructing all of this, and also obviously to the very impressive list of applicants who were also shared in an anonymous fashion with the GSSB members prior to the call. We are very gratified these days to be able to attract such quality applicants for these volunteer positions. It's a real credit to the importance of the work that we do, and gives me a lot of confidence in the outcome that we can look forward to. Okay, so thank you. I think we're going on to slide 19 now, session 4. Now this is the project review of the universal standards. And now I think I might be passing over to Sarah Jane. Is that right?
That's correct. Thank you, Judy. We're just keeping you all on your toes, and you are correct that it is slide 19. That's the sort of section header slide. So I will move straight on to the next slide, which goes through the agenda of this section. So I'm going to cover a status update on the project. What have we been up to since you met me in March? An overview of the expected outputs, that is the deliverables that we anticipate will be developed. Some analysis at a high level of the online survey, which I think is of interest to demonstrate who did respond to that and some characteristics of those respondents. And then we will have an update on the first work stream and a discussion on the fourth work stream, for which there was item 6 that was shared as a paper a couple of weeks ago with the GSSB. So without further ado, I'll move on to the project status. Sorry, skipped too far there. It's project status update. So I just wanted to give you, because I think based on some feedback previously, one question that, a few comments that were received from the GSSB as to how we were going to gather the data to inform us of any revisions that we may suggest. And so I think it's worthwhile spending some time going through the activities we have been executing. We developed detailed research proposals, one for each work stream, and whilst those aren't shared with the GSSB, they were in quite a level of detail. They were shared and discussed with the project subcommittee, and we made any tweaks accordingly based upon their feedback, and they are guiding us in terms of the different areas, sources we go to seek input from various stakeholders. And I'll move on to some of those stakeholder inputs. So I think we mentioned before that we have reviewed 45 GRI standards reports, and whilst I don't endeavour to provide a summary to the GSSB, we have one, it goes into some detail. These are being used in the various work streams to inform us accordingly. The online survey that we had open for, I think it was a 5-week period, that did gain a lot of momentum, and I will come on to some of the characteristics of the responses, but overall more than 240 responses, which was really good, from all types of constituencies. And we are obviously underway with the technical content analysis of that to feed into the various work streams and the outputs. We have been holding a number of stakeholder interviews, and we continue to do so, and these cover reporting organisations, regulators, consultants who support reporting organisations, assurance providers, sustainability reporting specialists, And we also have covered some academics as well. So we really are trying to get a good balance between those that prepare sustainability reports and those that are using the information that's provided in such reports. And then finally, there is a whole host of desktop research being undertaken looking at relevant academic articles, a focus on other reporting frameworks, such as the conceptual framework that underpins IFRS, developed by the IASB. We're looking at, a good example, looking at those kind of reporting models, and particularly with an eye on workstream 4, the general disclosures. We are looking at other governance codes to see if they can inform us of any revisions we may make there. Next slide, which is slide 22, and this is an indication of the types of outputs that the GSSB may expect from us. So the first work stream, which was the incorporation of human rights related disclosures and due diligence concept, we will come on to speak about that in more detail, but that is really the options of how we incorporate those human rights disclosures into the universal standards. Where may they fit? What might it look like? And again, the due diligence concept into GRI 103 management approach, and ultimately what revisions would need to be made to that standard. For the reporting principles, the second work stream, that would include potential revisions to the reporting principles, and then obviously the supporting guidance that sits within GRI 101 Foundation. The third work stream, which is looking at the reporting model, is if there are any changes, revisions we want to make to the in accordance options, or any revisions we want to make to the existing in accordance options, and that would also include the associated reasons for emission. They're part of that reporting model. And then finally, this one more straightforward, any changes for work stream 4 in the individual disclosures within GRI 102, the general disclosure standard. So our expectation is that we have shown you some indication in the paper that we shared of some of the revisions that we plan to make, but come September, we would have recommendations in similar type papers for consideration by the GSSB, with a clear indication of preferred options and justifications for why the standards division supports that particular option and not others. Because we don't want to leave you with the need to go through all of that. We want to do the homework on your behalf. And obviously we will continue to have calls with the GSSB subcommittee, and they'll be providing appropriate input. Okay, so that's a status of the project, an overview of the outputs, the deliverables, and I'm going to move on to the next slide and just take you through some key characteristics around the respondents to the survey. In total, we received 249 survey submissions from external parties. We did have a few come from our own GRI staff. We've excluded those in those analysis, but we will still look at that information. We find it helpful for those that are helping clients, for instance, in applying the standards. Of the ones that the data represents here, the external parties, it's worth pointing out that 3 submissions did come from GSSB members. Thank you to those 3. And we have included those in the statistics that I'm taking you through now. So the first statistic is an understanding of the respondents by region, and it is nice that we cover all of the regions, but I think anticipated Europe is by far the majority, but it's nice that we have a good representation from Asia, Latin America, some from North America, and the other regions. So I think we can say that we have input across the world. Moving on to the next slide, which is respondents by stakeholder group. This is just to highlight that we had over a third actually from reporters, so businesses who are using the GRI standards, but equally we had around a third as well from consultants, and they may be those helping businesses or organisations with their reporting. The remaining third covered users and assurance providers, and we provide some more detail on the slides for you to look at should you wish. The next shows the size of organisation, and I am pleased that we do cover a range of sizes here. So, as expected, we had a number, the majority, just over half, that are large organisations, but we had over a third, which is small, and that's something that we were very mindful of, that we wanted to represent the small and medium enterprises in any analysis that we do. The next slide was the purpose of using the GRI standards. So for those that became familiar with the survey, we actually tailored it such that the questions were appropriate for the type of engagement you had with the standards. And again, reporting organisations and consultants, by far the majority, but it was nice that we had over 20%, 1/5, who were report users, so can provide us with that perspective of using information in reports where the GRI standards have been applied. My last analysis slide is about the different sectors of reporting organisations and the associated reporting option. So the top 6 organisation sectors: real estate, finance, utilities, tech and communications, extractives and chemicals. Now that isn't to say that we didn't cover other sectors, but those were the largest, and I think it's quite nice that we have a good mix there, and also we include finance. And then when it comes to the reporting option, almost 2/3 are using the standards in accordance with the core option, but more than a quarter were giving us feedback from the perspective of a GRI referenced user of the standards. I think the split between core and comprehensive reflects what we understand based on the reports that we have analysed. Okay, I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions before I move into talking about the first work stream.
I'm not seeing any, Sarah Jane.
Okay.
No?
So, I'm now on slide 28, review of GRI's Universal Standards Work Stream 1. We talked about this in March, and so this is arguably an interim update. So just to remind you that the aim of this work stream is to explore the inclusion of human rights disclosures, which will be mandated for all reporting organisations, and secondly, to incorporate the due diligence concept into GRI 103. The feedback that we received in March from the GSSB on the feasibility and implications of mandating human rights disclosures for all organisations, we have taken that on board and developed 3 scenarios, possible scenarios for including the human rights and due diligence concepts. For each scenario, the Standards Division has identified advantages, disadvantages, and related implications for other standards of following that particular option, particularly focusing on any feasibility challenges. And it's probably worth just addressing what those challenges were. So I think there is this, if we mandate human rights, how does that apply to all types of enterprises, size, nature of enterprise, particularly focused on SMEs. And if we do mandate human rights and incorporate them into the universal standards, are we at risk of overstating the importance of reporting on human rights compared to other topics such as environmental and social issues, and what are the implications on other standards of doing that? The proposal that we are developing is based on the desk research undertaken by the team and consultations with the GSSB subcommittee, as well as the Human Rights Technical Committee. We continue to get their feedback and other stakeholders through interviews. The Standards Division will recommend one of these scenarios for consideration for the GSSB in the September meeting. So now we move on to what are those 3 scenarios. So the 3 that we are exploring are A, a new section in GRI 102, the general disclosures, that is dedicated to human rights with a subset of the disclosures. For example, human rights policy, embedding of policy, and specific human rights topics. B, the second option, this would be a new universal standard dedicated to human rights, example GRI 104. And then the final option is a new topic-specific standard dedicated to human rights. So those are the 3 options. And in addition, a proposal will be made for including the due diligence concept in GRI 103 management approach, which arguably should be the same for all 3 scenarios. Directionally, the first scenario, scenario A, at the moment presents the greatest advantage based on the evidence gathered so far in our research. And as next steps, we will continue to develop these scenarios and consult further key stakeholders. And the second critical part is we need to take into account the outcomes of the other 3 work streams, which is why at the moment categorically we don't feel in a position to say that scenario A is the preferred option, although directionally that is what we're working towards. Okay, so that was an update on workstream 1, and now we would like to move to an update on workstream 4, which is any potential revisions to the general disclosures. And a paper was shared with the GSSB a couple of weeks ago. I have had some detailed written feedback from Robin, so thank you for that. And I had 3 guiding questions, although these are just prompts to see if you have any particular comments, feedback, input. So I leave those there and ask if there are any comments or questions for me.
Anyone from the GSSB would like to share a comment or question? I'm not sure I'm getting any at the moment, Sarah Jane.
Okay, sometimes silence can be golden, right?
It can sometimes, yes. It obviously is a very, it is a very involved project. There are a lot of sort of consequences when you consider various changes across this. So this may take some time to attempt to work through. I think we do have a useful question being raised. Can we provide further input on these questions via email? What would be useful to you, Sarah Jane?
Of course, yes. I would really welcome any feedback that any of the members have. That would be very valuable to the project team.
Yeah, good. And I think, and perhaps here's just a process question, Sarah Jane. I mean, with respect to the various scenarios that you presented in the previous slide, as I recall, you said that the working group would be proposing one of them, would be forwarding one of them to the GSSB. I think members might find it very helpful to actually have some discussion amongst our group about the pros and cons of a variety of these. It may be too early a stage for us to do that with any kind of, anything beyond just the sort of high level conceptual idea here. Will we have that opportunity to sort of go through all of that and to understand, when there is a scenario that's presented to the GSSB, that we can consider it in the sort of reasonably good knowledge of what the alternatives might be?
So Judy, just to confirm, this is in respect of the 3 scenarios for the first work stream.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess the reason for providing them here was to give you directionally what we were considering, and the fact that we are possibly proposing one of them or favouring one of them over the others. I wonder whether we've given you enough information about why these 3, what they involve, what the advantages, disadvantages and implications are. So perhaps we have that discussion in September, when we will have provided you with a lot more information to support the 3 options.
I think I would welcome that. I think that's probably a good idea.
This is Bastian. I think the idea here being that what we don't want to do is to present just one scenario to you for the different works. And what we will do is we present to quite some detail the considerations that we've gone through to identify one scenario that we've then developed in more detail for you, right? I think that's the approach that we're taking here. And the idea being that to facilitate a process that can move more quickly to a public comment, if we work on the 3 scenarios presented here, for example, for the first work stream, and work them out in all its glory in detail, we will delay the overall project quite considerably, because we will need to have another approval moment. But we will evidence the thought process and the characteristics which we've considered of the different scenarios in choosing a specific option. And that will be part of the discussion. And we can still revert also in September if there's no support for the recommendation of the standards or division, of course. I think Kirsten has a question.
Yes,
yeah.
She has.
Thank you. I think it's a very good idea to explore these 3 scenarios. I also have a suggestion for a 4th scenario, which would be a combination of A and C, which means to include some mandatory disclosures related to human rights in the new GRI 102, but also with a separate topic-specific standard for those reporting organizations where human rights would be a material topic, as this will differ substantially between different industries, different geographies, and not least different sizes of the reporting organization. And in Norwegian we say that we shouldn't shoot sparrows with cannons, and it feels a little bit like that if a small and medium-sized enterprise present in one geography should have to answer to all the disclosures developed so far on human rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. And this noted, we might be in touch to explore that 4th option with you also in a bit more detail, so that we can look at this together with the GSB in September also. Just on your comment on the small and medium size, I mean, this is something that will come back on quite a number of items that are explored under the umbrella of the Universal Standards Review. And there is a relation also to the in accordance and importantly the reasons for omission also. So enabling organizations to opt out of certain requirements on the basis of that they're not applicable to them, whether that's for size or the fact that they're only operating in a certain geography and so on. That requires, certainly also based on the feedback that we are already receiving on in accordance and reasons for omission, that requires a second look now after the first years of implementation of the standards.
Yeah, and if I can if I can just add to that, thank you so much for that comment. And within scenario A, that is almost like a sub-scenario of A, that it's not a given that with the recommended human rights related disclosures from that project's technical committee, that we would necessarily have to sweep all of them into the universal standards. So thinking about which ones could be there and which ones would still remain in topic specific standards is certainly something we're exploring. So it's nice to hear that you would support that being explored as well.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments or suggestions or requests from the GSSB members? Okay, hearing none. Sarah Jane, have you got what you need from us at this point? And perhaps you can just say something about timing for any additional written feedback that anybody would like to share with you, perhaps, or any other process advice that you'd like to give.
As always, the sooner the better, because if we can get this feedback and incorporate it with all the other stakeholder feedback we have, we can then know that we are analysing all the different viewpoints. So could I make a recommendation that within the next 2 weeks, or certainly by the end of 2 weeks tomorrow, which would be the 12th of July, if people do have written feedback either on the scenarios we're exploring for the first work stream, and then any comments, suggestions for the individual disclosures within GRI 102 that we are proposing for revision, they would be most welcomed.
Thank you very much, Sarah Jane. I think that's very reasonable, that time frame. So if members can be mindful of that deadline for any further comments or feedback that they'd like to send in, that would be very helpful. Okay, this brings us on to session 5, which is just our any other business. I'm not aware of any topics that have been forwarded for discussion under AOB, but I would like to open it up now. We do have a private off-the-record information session coming up for a few minutes. Obviously no decisions are taken then, but are there any other topics that members would like to raise at this point for discussion now during the public meeting? Corley LaRue, would you like to make a comment?
Thanks, Judy. Just a very quick comment that I wanted to congratulate and commend the GRI and particularly the Standards Division with their participation in the corporate reporting dialogue. I don't know if any other GSSB members attended the webinar earlier this week with the feedback from that process. Sarah Jane was present in the webinar that I attended, and I wanted to congratulate her on representing the GRI very well. So well done on that, and keep up the good work. We look forward to seeing how the GRI participates going forward in that great initiative. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Corley. I'm sure that's very much appreciated. And just for everyone's information, at the top of the hour, I'm due to join the GRI board for their meeting, and I'm certain that there will be more discussion of that topic there. Any kind of feedback or updates from that are useful to you, I will make sure are passed on to you. But I think that's very much appreciated. Any other comments or questions from members? If not, I think we can close the public meeting now, and with our thanks to the Standards Division and to any of our listeners who have been participating during the webcast. And we will keep you advised of the record of this meeting in due course, and of course the next meeting, which is scheduled for September. Thank you very much. I think we can switch off the webinar now.